Well, good evening, parents of Bloomfield Hills. I want to thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Todd Bidlack. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Learning Services. And this evening, what we wanted to be able to do is have a parent information night regarding Bloomfield Virtual. So we'll be going through different aspects of this new program that we're very excited about to be launching this fall, especially for students that may need to opt out or be interested to stay completely remote throughout the 2020-2021 school year. So we'll get started. I first have an update to tell you about that. Bloomfield Virtual is only going to be for students in grades 5. We came up with a different alternative that we'll be exploring for grades 6 through 12, and more information about that will be presented at the next board meeting, which I believe is August 20th. So as we kind of go through this evening, I wanted to be able to or really what the goal of tonight is to be able to describe the two options that you would be looking at. And we realize in order to make a really informed decision around whether or not Bloomfield Virtual is right for you and your family and your child is to first take a look at what in-person with distance learning would look like. So there's really two options that families have. The first option is to stay in an in-person state, knowing that likely this year we're going to move in and out of distance learning with school closures. In fact, we're already under that right now because we'll be starting the school year under distance learning. We'll be doing a remote format. And when we feel like we'll be able to bring students back in, we'll have them back into the classroom, but that might be in a hybrid model. So between these two choices, first with the in-person, that would be moving in and out of the physical environment of the classroom. You have the second option, which is Bloomfield Virtual, where those students will not be returning to the physical classroom if the school opens back up or when the school opens back up. So you really have those two options. Now, the virtual platforms and frameworks instructionally that we'll be introducing tonight are very similar to each other. So the district has a very robust and rigorous virtual platform that students in option 1 would fall into if there's a school closure. And for option 2, that Bloomfield Virtual students would stay in that framework. The primary difference between these two options is that students that are enrolled in Bloomfield Virtual will not be returning physically to the classroom environment at least through the first semester. And then we'll be able to work with parents on providing an option whether or not they want to continue for that second semester or they want to transition into an in-person environment for the second half of the school year. So let's first get into what option 1 might look like so that you can make an informed decision around whether or not Bloomfield Virtual is right for you. So we'll first start with, Sarah, if you could just, thank you. We'll first start with the COVID-19 precautions that are in place. And I'm going to walk you through a few of those. I'm not going to take you through every single one, but our hope is that we can at least paint a good enough picture for you to be able to understand and almost imagine what this next school year is going to look like when students are in person. And then from there, we will jump into what Bloomfield Virtual will look like for this year as well. So what you're seeing here are a lot of different aspects of our COVID-19 preparedness plan in terms of hygiene, various precautions for cleaning, different type of procedures that are being put in place, including contact tracing, and all sorts of measures to really make sure that that environment is as safe as we can possibly get while we have COVID-19 among us in the community. So one of the things that I already mentioned was really what we'll be asking all families to do is start their day by doing a self-screening. There will be an app that's easily downloadable or a website program. We'll be able to go through a series of questions to be able to ensure the district that you've done screening in the morning before students come to school. Right after that, what the bus would look like. Go ahead and go to the next slide there, Sarah. For transportation, we'll also have measures there as well where students will ride the bus if you're going to utilize their transportation system with wearing facial coverings during that time. And by the time a student ends up on the bus or at arrival in the morning, they should have already undergone the screening at home that I just previously talked about. For lunches, we'll be having that in our classrooms. We'll be trying to minimize the amount of exposure that classes have from one classroom to another by making sure that we really kind of move more into a delivery of lunch system as opposed to students going and getting their meals, which that may mean, because we're switching that approach, that we might need to get those requests for lunches far ahead of time so that we can get that delivery system accurate. It takes a little bit more work to be able to do that as opposed to students coming down to the lunchroom to move through that process. In addition, we have also recently changed our requirements, as well as the entire county, around elementary students being required to wear facial coverings throughout the day in their primary classroom as well. So that's a new change since last Thursday, and that's something that you would want to be prepared for. And so it's great practice right now that while you're out in the community to encourage your children to wear facial coverings, because that's starting to get them used to what that's going to feel like as they move throughout their school day on the bus, at lunch, and so on, with those facial coverings on. So here are some of the requirements, just kind of in a broad sense for facial coverings. Our teachers will be wearing them as well in all of our classrooms. We'll be wearing them in common areas as well, such as hallways, transportation, some of the areas I just mentioned. And of course, our students will also be wearing facial coverings, kindergarten through 12th grade. One of the things that we want to make sure that we highlight is that we'll also be utilizing a delayed start. And here's the purpose for why we're looking at a delayed start. We're going to be taking our specials at K-5 and moving them to a virtual setting that will help us prevent that mix of one cohort of students to another. It will allow us to keep those classrooms a little bit more contained. So we'll be offering our specials package more on that virtual platform, which means once the student arrives to school, they're really with their core teacher throughout the day. They will stay with the same group of students, and then they will leave at our typical dismissal time. So that's one thing to take note of, is that for in-person students this year, we will be having a delayed start at elementary and at middle school. We'll show the middle school bell schedule here in just a second. And what we've done is we're asking for specials to be done at home virtually. And we've allowed some time in the morning. And of course, you'll see that, we're moving right from specials to in-person learning. And of course, there would be some flexibility when a child logs in, knowing that you can't be in a special at home and then be in your classroom right away just a moment later. And then same thing at the middle school, there will be a delayed start there as well. So instead of arriving at 8:20, we'll be arriving at 9:20 this year. And for the same purpose, we'll be moving those specials and electives to a virtual platform, which will help us create a safer environment. And in fact, the same type of structure for those specials, we'll be using that in both settings for students that are in person as well as students that are in Bloomfield Virtual. So this program is one of the areas or course offerings that we're going to have that extends across both of those programs. So here are some of the things that we are looking at and should be updated in terms of what that plan will look like by the next time we have a Board of Ed meeting next week. And what I want to specifically talk about is what in-person might look like as it refers to hybrid models. So first you might be wondering, what is a hybrid model? Well, a traditional schedule is that students are in school 5 days a week. A remote learning model or a distance learning model means that students are completely virtual 5 days a week. In a hybrid model, that means that students are in school physically 2 to 3 days a week, and then they are remote 2 to 3 days a week. So why would we do this? Well, one of the things that we're trying to do is to figure out how we can separate children within or space them out 6 feet apart. The way to do that is to take a classroom configuration and divide them in half. So you have half the population of any given building or any given classroom there on a single day. This allows us to spread that classroom out. So basically, a classroom has to share, those students have to share the in-person days. The days that they're not in person, they would be virtual or remote in a distance learning format at that time. it's very likely that the next phase that we would move into, or the next step the district would take as we shift from a distance learning format, would be to first move into a hybrid learning format, which means what we'd be looking at is moving into a partial schedule of being in person mixed with a partial schedule of being virtual for our in-person students. And then from there, our goal would be working up to eventually 5 days a week to more of a traditional schedule in which you would no longer be virtual at any part of your program. So here's what those two options look like when you break them into strategies. So the first option, which would be the in-person option, which we're really referring to face-to-face instruction. And if we are all the way over in that area, that means we're back to a traditional schedule. We have about 26 kids in an elementary classroom. We're going to school 5 days a week. It wouldn't necessarily mean we've brought electives or specials back physically yet. It could still be virtual, or we may have already have that switch. Or we could be in a hybrid model, which would mean that you have a mix of that schedule, a couple days a week in person, a few days a week being virtual. Or like we're going to start in September 8th, is to be completely remote for those children who are in that first option. So staying in this option means, because what we're imagining is that there are going to be school closures throughout the year. And whether or not that's at the county level, at the state level, or just within the district, it's pretty certain that we're going to experience various forms of school closures. And we're already experiencing one, and we haven't yet made it to the first day of school. So students in that first option will be moving from those different types of settings, from remote to hybrid, and hoping to get to 5 days a week instruction. The real question is, what is the duration of those school closures and the frequency of those school closures as we move throughout the year? For students registering in Bloomfield Virtual at K-5, those students are going to stay in that distance learning format. So the frameworks between the remote learning in option one and the distance learning, the virtual, those are essentially the same. So our students, K-5 on September 8th, no matter which part you're in, are going to be experiencing similar structures throughout the day. The real difference between these two options is that Bloomfield Virtual will not be returning to in-person. So I want to take a moment here just to kind of show what a classroom might look like. So with this classroom, what we have about, I think about 26, 27 individuals in the classroom. We have the teacher up front, 6 feet away from the students. Everyone is wearing facial coverings. And you'll notice on the desk there is a partition. We're likely not going to use that in our plan, but the picture was taken when that was still being investigated. And here you'll see that we have, this would be more of a traditional in-person model where all the students are back and we're trying to space them out as far as possible. With this plan, we can only really get kids, in most cases, about 3 to 4 feet apart. And it's rare that we can get them to 6 feet apart because there's not enough physical space in the classroom. And to really spread them out, we don't have enough classrooms or enough staff to be able to make that many different pods to be able to do that, which really brings us into the hybrid model of why we have to share the week and the in-person days. So on a hybrid model, you could take about half of those participants out, half of those students out, and now we can get to that 6-foot range of distance where it would be socially distanced based on the strongly recommendations of the governor's plan in phase 4, while also wearing facial coverings. So classroom configurations would be very similar to this. It would just be a question of how many students you would see in that type of setting. And in this setting, what you're looking at is if we reach our goal of having all of our students back 5 days a week. But most likely what we would experience first is a hybrid model, which would be half of those students for about half of the week in that classroom at a time. So just to reiterate one more time that there is really 2 options here, because the distance learning format in both of these options for our elementary students is a robust, rigorous plan that meets the state criteria, the state standards, and will be aligned to each other. We want to make sure that students that choose Bloomfield Virtual, if they make the decision to go back to in-person learning at the end of the semester, that they're doing that seamlessly without various units or curricular pieces not being aligned. We want to make sure that that transition is seamless. So there will be alignment across those two different type of programming options. And again, once we're in distance learning and option one, those frameworks are very close to being identical to the same frameworks that we have in option two for virtual. So just to say one last time, the difference here between these two formats is that students in Bloomfield Virtual will not be returning to in-person within the first semester when we open up schools physically for students to come back into class. That is the real difference between these two pieces here. And so what we want to be able to do, now that you kind of have a sense for what in-person might look like, with the hybrid model, with distance learning formats, as well as what in-person might look like visibly in a classroom, we wanted to tell you about a program that we're really excited about, that we are ready to launch. And we're going to have Kimberly Hempton, she is our Director of Elementary Education, take over from here and introduce you to Bloomfield Virtual. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. As Todd has said, my name is Kimberly Hempton, and I'm excited to bring additional information about this program to you this evening. As you can see here, we're glad you're here. We're glad that you're considering this opportunity for your students. And our vision around this is really a brand new school. Welcome to your school. We've crafted a mission statement for learning together. We recognize that conditions in Michigan may prevent families from feeling comfortable with a full return to school. And it is absolutely our mission to assure that students continue to feel a caring and safe environment where they know that they are able to seek their ambitious academic pursuits. They're able to leverage technology in ways that keep them connected with their peers as well as with their teachers. And in kindergarten through fifth grade, we're all about building independence for learners and thinking about ways that students grow agency with their own choice and decision-making around their learning as we prepare for later school years. So this mission statement has driven the creation of Bloomfield Virtual, and the elements that you'll see on the next slide have been really critical to our design. We've thought about how to engage in learner-centered experiences where we can continue to think about each individual student, the strengths they bring into that classroom, the academic needs or social emotional needs they may have, the way they're interested in learning. Our teachers are poised and excited to meet your children in this new environment and to continue to serve as mentors that facilitate learning, very similarly to what we do in our Bloomfield Hills schools classrooms now. This sense of belonging, a community of learners that come together to know that they are seen and valued and heard, is going to continue to be meaningful for us in this virtual space. And you'll see at the bottom, the portrait of a learner is also mentioned when we think about the ways that our students grow in their disposition to experience the world, to think about their own learning, but also to think about the ways that they make impact in the world around them through communication, perspective taking, considering new innovations, which are ever more important as the world around us changes. This idea of place-based learning and leveraging the rich assets that are available to us in Bloomfield Hills with Bowers School Farm and the Johnson Nature Center have begun to take shape with our design team while we think about the ways that while students are away from one another physically, they are not alone. And we are excited to engage in both that farm and nature center experience, as well as other virtual field trips that will enhance the learning, much like happens under the roof of a school building. Of course, the executive order and the phases that the state experiences will play into how those experiences are designed, but we are absolutely attending to them much in the same way that we would match them to our curricula in our brick and mortar buildings. So I hope that that sounds exciting to you. We are, as I said at the start, excited about these elements and a new format in which we can engage with our learners. And so as you heard Mr. Bidlack speak, and as I navigate some of our mission statements and the things that we anticipate bringing forward in the learning environments, chances are you've got a question about, is this right? Is this right for my child? And that's a big question. It's a lot to consider, certainly. And this opportunity for students in kindergarten through 5th grade, certainly you know your child best and where they may need some additional supports or reminders navigating a virtual environment or how they manage their time. But I want to assure you that our students, along with their teachers, are going to have technology tools as well as routines built into their day that signal much of how they will work through those things with the guidance of the teacher. Our learning environments will look to mirror the in-person teaching and learning the best that they can in that virtual setting, where a teacher may provide a bit of instruction and then send students off to practice. Students likely in the virtual setting wouldn't go away per se across the room, or maybe they would choose another comfortable place to sit, but they would still be in that lesson setting, even if the teacher is not providing direct instruction at that time. And you'll hear a little more detail around that as we move through the presentation tonight. There will be devices provided, iPads for kindergarten and 1st graders, and Chromebooks for 2nd through 5th graders, to each student that completes the technology agreement upon enrollment to Bloomfield Virtual. These instructional interactions are created and facilitated by our Bloomfield Hills teachers, and we're excited about that work. And as Mr. Bidlack mentioned, that will allow us to remain cohesive as an organization, so that should a student leave this environment and re-enter our school building, they will see a seamless shift back into a particular unit of study or what they may have been learning about content-wise in Bloomfield Virtual. Our goal is to line that up as close as we can, knowing that each day is not lockstep in every classroom, but the trajectory will aim to create a very successful experience for students in that regard. The question that had, I'm sorry, the statement down there at the bottom that you see came from a common question that we've heard from families about participation in extracurricular events or clubs that may be in place at their home school. And students enrolled in Bloomfield Virtual are certainly eligible and able to participate in anything outside of the classroom day that may be offered at their home building. Bloomfield Virtual students would follow any schedule adjustments that might be required under the governor's orders that may impact some of those activities. But please know that all Bloomfield students are welcome in any of those experiences that are currently underway in the home buildings. The next bit of information here is really specific to students who receive special education supports, and answering that question about virtual learning. Is that right for my student that may receive some additional accommodation and or support within their school day is also a big question. And so I'm going to invite Carrie Fines to detail some of the work that has been done for students that receive special education services.
Thank you, Kimberly. My name is Carrie Fines, and I'm a teacher consultant in the district. And I'm here to talk a little bit about what to expect with the Bloomfield Virtual. We do anticipate that all IEPs and 504s will be followed as they have been written, including accommodations, programs, and services, and with the understanding that some of our IEPs and 504s may need to be adjusted based on each student's individual needs. Based upon enrollment, a virtual special education teacher will be assigned to support the students with IEPs in the general education curriculum utilizing small group instruction. Resource room support will be provided to students with IEPs, and it may be placed into the students' virtual schedules. Students who receive special education programs and services within our ARP, FRP, DHH, or SEED program will have their instruction delivered directly by a special education teacher. Ancillary services will also be provided virtually by Bloomfield Hills staff, including speech, OT, PT, social work, and ASL. Given that each student's plan is individualized, if you have any questions about whether or not virtual learning is right for your child with an IEP or a 504, please reach out to your child's caseload teacher or the special education department. On the left side of the screen, you'll see two different sample schedules. One for 3-5 and one for K2. And what that does is this is specifically addressed towards students receiving resource room support. This allows the students to be there in their general ed class for the general ed instruction that is so important to them, as well as a built-in support during that individual work time throughout the day.
Good evening, I'm Sarah Fairman. I'm the Director of Secondary Education. I'm here to talk to you a little bit more about the platforms that we are going to be using for the Bloomfield Virtual, as well as the sample schedules for the students. So for students in kindergarten through 5th grade, we'll be using Google Classroom as your main source of information. It's your #1 portal into learning. And then also as the students meet, we'll be using the Zoom. Instead of Google Meets may still be used, but Zoom allows us, as Kimberly had stated earlier, a lot more flexibility in able to pushing students out to breakout rooms or being able to take a break and then calling students back, whereas Google Meets did not quite have that capacity. And so we have found that to be a much better instructional model for your student. So the schedule, which has been already published in the Bloomfield Virtual Handbook, and this is a sample schedule, and when the teachers speak at the end of the presentation this evening, they'll talk more about how this sample schedule is a skeleton or a framework outline for the instructional method, and every teacher themselves will actually create the schedule that meets the needs of their students in front of them. But we would start in the morning with check-in and in connections to make sure that we are building that community, making sure everyone feels welcome and safe in their school, just like we would if we were in a brick and mortar building. And then we would have mathematics, reading, and then a lunch and recess in there. One of the big comments that we're seeing, or common comments that we are seeing, is about the idea of screen time. We agree with you that screen time is not ideal for younger students, and that we want to minimize that, but we're also trying to maximize the idea of live instruction with the teacher. So we have synchronous and asynchronous learning. Synchronous learning means the teacher is on and the students are also on the computer at that time, but that does not necessarily mean direct instruction, just like we're doing to you this evening. This is not actually the instructional model that we would use with elementary students, but rather we would do a mini lesson of 5 or 10 minutes, and then the teacher would put kids into groups, into breakout rooms through the Zoom, and then that allows the students to work in a smaller group, much like they would in the classroom at their table groups, and talk to each other, and the teacher would pop in and out of those conversations. So it allows us to also build their skills, also allows them to build community. So when we say it's synchronous, that means that everybody is on at the same time. And then there's asynchronous learning. That idea behind asynchronous learning is really that the student would not be in front of the screen. I think Kimberly mentioned that the screen might be nearby, but they would have a separate desk or another area to work in. They might have a timer that's on the actual Zoom meeting that tells them how much time they have until they have to come back, and maybe a bell to call them back to the computer, but they wouldn't be sitting in front of the screen. So what would they be doing during asynchronous time? That might be a time where they're writing in a journal. That might be time where they're doing math practice in their math journal, which is material that you will have when we do Bloomfield Virtual. A big difference that we have this year compared to the spring was in the spring, the schools were closed completely and teachers were not allowed into the buildings, nor were students. I'm sure you were frustrated trying to get your materials back. With going into the fall, this is a very different atmosphere. So we might have packets for you to pick up maybe once every 2 weeks that allows you to have those materials in front of you at home. So it wouldn't be dependent upon you always being in front of a screen. So after lunch and recess, we would again do connections. Connections, when I taught 3rd grade, it could be a read aloud, it could be shared storytelling, it could be show and tell. It's not going to be something we do every day, but it's a nice way to gather everyone back together and to remind them that learning is going to begin again. In the afternoon, we would have writing, and then an academic block that could be word study, it could be science, it could be social studies, it could be reviewing a math concept. All of those things would happen within the school day. And then at the end of the day would be the asynchronous learning, which would be your specials. And then also independent work and or small work with the teacher in a one-on-one situation as needed to help the student along. And then that way we have an end to the school day, a final 3 o'clock end to the school day that allows you as a family to move on and be, school is over, it's time for the next step, and also for the teacher as well. The next sample I'm going to show you is the 3-5 sample. Again, it's just a sample, but it has a little bit more time in terms of asynchronous work that we're expecting the student to be able to do as they become more independent, as well as that synchronous time where everyone is expected to be on together. But again, it's more of an engagement piece versus just a sit and look at a screen piece of information. The lunches are pretty close together. That's our goal, is to be able to make it easier for families as we go through. And then lastly, some of the off-screen activities that we will be talking about are designed to mimic or mirror what happens in the classroom, but also with the materials that you have on hand at home. So while you will have material pickup, we'll give you a list of supplies that would also be beneficial as you stack your learning center for yourself at home, so that students can be able to do those off-screen activities. Again, we value off-screen as well. We feel it's important, but we also feel it's important that we give that live instruction with one teacher that the student knows well. So I'm going to hand this over now to Lauren Dempsey, and she is our instructional specialist, and she will walk you through how you go about setting up a virtual school.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Sarah said, I'm Lauren Dempsey, our district's technology integration specialist. I'm here to speak with you today about going a little bit more in depth of what learning will look like in Bloomfield Virtual. Bloomfield Virtual's approach to learning really utilizes a scaffolding model that focuses first on basics like access and community to help to ensure that we have a successful learning experience for all of our students. At the start of our scaffolding, Bloomfield Virtual's teachers are going to focus on helping students and parents access tools and resources that will be utilized in the program. At the next slide, by focusing on technology and access, we're helping to eliminate barriers and also creating good habits for our students. And by doing this right at the very beginning of the school year or of the semester, then teachers can help to pave the way for productive online learning. As it was mentioned before, for students that are enrolled in Bloomfield Virtual, we'll be providing, as requested, iPads for kindergarten and first grade students. And then 2nd through 5th will be receiving Chromebooks. There will be tutorials available for students and families, and just trying to make sure that that technology is not a barrier to learning. It just helps to facilitate the learning. Next on the scaffolding, building community and a positive learning culture is really an integral part of what Bloomfield Virtual's mission is. Teachers will work to build a community in which students can very easily navigate and can interact with their peers. Different interactions like morning meetings, the small group projects, and full class discussions really will help to build a bond between classmates. Bloomfield Virtual will also have multi-age and multi-grade houses in which students will have the opportunity to explore different areas of shared interest, different passions, and help to foster new relationships between students. Bloomfield Virtual students will have the opportunity also, as was mentioned before, to participate in both virtual and, if appropriate, in-person field trips or athletics and other extracurricular activities to help build that sense of community. Once our teachers have established productive routines and started to build their classroom communities, the learning then transitions into a space of student inquiry and information exchange. The guiding principles that are found in our portrait of a learner will help to shape the student's academic progress. Teams of teachers over the summer have worked really, really hard to create unified PACE curriculum tools that help to ensure that our Bloomfield virtual students learn equitably and comparably to any of the in-person students. As the Bloomfield virtual teachers move through this curriculum, they'll utilize several different types of virtual and distance learning tools and resources to help to create engaging and rich learning experiences. All of our Bloomfield Hills teachers receive professional learning and development on virtual and online instruction and will be supported by teams throughout the school year. Different examples of these types of activities include assignments, quizzes, and materials that students will access via Google Classroom, interactive mini lesson videos, different types of offline activities or project-based learning, readers and writers workshops, small group interactions or collaborations, targeted multimedia and rich feedback from their teachers, and lots of other different types of activities. As our Bloomfield virtual students move throughout the school year, they'll experience some really engaging, rich learning that will help them to grow personally and educationally. A very strong focus on community, on social emotional learning, and a positive school culture will also be supported by 3 big goals: weekly social emotional learning time, in-class meetings, and then different daily routines and classroom check-ins. For students that are enrolling in Bloomfield Virtual, routine will definitely be important. We recommend that you design a space at home that has the materials that are essential to learning. Since learning throughout the day will be both offline and online, making sure that devices and chargers are readily available is important. Ideally, the space should be comfortable for both your student and any other persons helping them throughout the day. We also recommend easily accessible storage for supplies so that your student can independently access the materials that they need. Above all, we really hope that Bloomfield Virtual can help make your students' at-home learning experience fun, educational, and engaging.
Thank you, Lauren. I'd like to take a moment to let you know that the slides that you're seeing this evening will be posted to our website as early as tomorrow morning. So if, like me, you would be frantically taking notes about certain information, I want to let you know that this information, as well as the Q&A session we're about to move into, will be posted. And so I would like to introduce you virtually to our school design team. You see on the slide here a number of contributors that have been working tirelessly through the summer months to bring this program forward for our students. And this evening we have some teachers who have spent time as virtual content creators that are prepared with the questions that we've received from the community surveys. And we've batched those into themes so that we can address as many questions as possible. And those teachers here with us tonight are Amanda Malemica, Pam Walsh, Kathy Jakubiak, and Carrie Fines. And so I'm going to launch this to Amanda so that you can hear some of the questions that have been posed by the community and hear directly from our design team.
Thank you, Kimberly. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Malemica, and I currently teach at Eastover Elementary. I'm going to be sharing some frequently asked questions around teacher and student learning experiences. The first question is, will my students see the same teacher all day? The answer to that is yes. As a Bloomfield virtual student, your child will see the same teacher every day. If you choose just one semester, your child will most likely have a new teacher if they move into face-to-face learning. The second question, what does virtual learning on Zoom look like for my child? Teachers will utilize Zoom, which will create a single login into the classroom every morning. Teachers will be able to provide direct instruction for the whole class, move students into pairs or small groups, as well as provide independent practice time, much like we do in the normal school setting. The teacher will be able to move students into the breakout rooms, back into the full group for the next piece of instruction or following breaks. Please refer to the synchronous times in the sample schedule to reference times where students will be live with the teacher. The third question is, how will teachers and students engage in learning together? Learning experiences will be both synchronous and asynchronous, and at the discretion of the teacher are designed to be completed independently and in collaboration with other students in the virtual classroom. Please see the sample schedules on the screen for K2 and 3rd through 5th grade. While the schedule may vary a little depending on the teacher or the grade level, the instruction will mirror the school day. In each subject, students will attend to a short lesson, have time to work independently, meet with other students in breakout rooms for collaboration, have a reflection time, and then time to share. Of course, please know the teacher will move through these decisions like we always do in the classroom based on the learning needs of the particular group of students and the content at hand. Children will have access to the teacher throughout the school day, but not necessarily be participating in active meetings at all times. More details will come from your child's virtual teacher during curriculum night. The last question before I move this over to my colleague, Kathy Jakubiak, is what instructional approaches will be used? Please know all Bloomfield Hills School classrooms follow the Michigan academic standards, and our curriculum in Bloomfield Virtual will follow that same Bloomfield Hills curriculum. To be specific, reading and writing instruction will occur within the workshop model, just like we do in school. This entails a short, direct lesson given by the teacher that explains the learning focus, followed by guided and independent practice time. The learning is reinforced with small groups, concluded by a share or reflection time. Students and teachers will engage in one-on-one meetings as needed. Similar to reading and writing, our district's math approach involves a direct lesson, guided practice, independent work, and then some group work. We will be using the Envision program. One-to-one student help will also be available as needed. In science and in social studies, the units follow a common district curriculum schedule. Curriculum between Bloomfield Virtual and in-person will be closely aligned as far as the units taught, with the result being that the same units will have been taught by the semester end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kathy Jakubiak, and she is going to take over.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, my name is Kathy Jakubiak, and I've been in the district teaching elementary school, actually across the district, for about the last 20 years or so. And tonight I'm going to talk to you about the frequently asked questions surrounding instructional materials and supplies. And so the first question that we received is, will the curriculum for in-person be the same so that all students are on the same track? And just to reiterate, the curriculum between Bloomfield Virtual and in-person will be closely aligned as far as the units being taught each semester. This alignment will provide opportunities for a shared grade level experience at both the end of the semester and at the end of the school year. The next question that we received is, will students be restricted from jumping ahead and completing future work to rush through assignments? Our Bloomfield virtual teachers will provide instruction for students with both content and relationships in mind. By building these relationships and monitoring student progress, teachers will be able to guide students through learning experiences at a pace that makes sense for the learner. Students will check in daily with their teacher, and this is to maintain the routine of school, the sense of community, and to monitor progress as instruction moves forward. This process will help keep students from rushing through work while allowing them to work at their own pace. Please remember that the virtual school will be different from our continuous learning plan in the spring, so we will be able to provide student-to-student connections across the classroom. We'll be able to guide learners and provide feedback and create a community that enjoys learning, all while keeping student motivation high. The last question in this area that we received is, what materials will be utilized? So as you heard, the district will be providing kindergarten and first grade students with iPads, and Chromebooks will be provided for students in grades 2 through 5. Additionally, a grade level suggested supply list will be made available so our virtual students can get ready for their upcoming school year, just as they might any other school year. Please note that resources are likely to vary by class and lesson, but you can expect live instruction, links to videos, graphic organizers, scan materials to read and engage with, reading materials, including books and ebooks, math journals, as well as teacher-created and or curated resources. Our goal is to keep at-home printing to a minimum. Bloomfield Virtual students will have access to school-provided materials like their Envision math workbooks, Handwriting Without Tears books, as well as any additional texts that may be used to support instruction. Families will receive information about accessing those materials at the Bloomfield Virtual orientation. In an attempt to provide the most comprehensive learning experiences and flexibility, we may need to make arrangements for an adult to pick up materials from their child's home school, and we'll keep you updated about that. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Pam Walsh.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kathy. I'm Pam Walsh, a fourth grade teacher at East Hills. I will be answering questions regarding student work and communication of learning. My first question is, how will students receive feedback related to their learning, and how will assignments be communicated? Communication with students will take place in many different ways. Daily class meetings and lessons where teachers and kids can speak directly to one another, along with digital websites like Google Classroom and Gmail, when age appropriate, are all useful tools for students and teachers to communicate with one another. My next question is, how will students' work be assessed to check for understanding? Students will be expected to actively participate each day in the virtual classroom. The interactions between teacher and student will be one way that feedback is shared. Some learning experiences will be more formally submitted for feedback, while others will be ongoing pieces of work. Students will use Google Classroom, shared Google Documents or slides, and pictures or video projects as possible submissions as well. Teachers will establish these routines and the how-tos with their individual classes. Quizzes and tests can be given using our Google Suite apps as another way to check for understanding. Projects and quick checks, for example, exit tickets, sticky note Padlet parking lots, are also forms of ongoing assessment. Students reading and writing will receive teacher feedback through the use of student Zoom conferences during daily independent reading and writing workshop times, as well as in the form of written comments. The Envision Math program has digital student work with accessible tools to support learners, as well as online assessments. The math journal pages provide immediate feedback for students. My last question refers to parent-teacher communication. How will parents and teachers communicate about student progress? For teacher communication with parents, Google Classroom, Remind, and email will be used. Other forms may also be used based on individual teacher and family needs. A parent-teacher conference schedule for virtual school will follow the district calendar with September input conferences, November conferences, and spring conferences. Report cards will be at the end of each semester. Also remember that just like during in-person school, teacher and parent interactions are not limited to scheduled conference report card times. Teachers are always available during school hours to connect and partner with parents.
Thank you so much, Amanda, Kathy, and Pam. I know that the questions are many anytime we launch a new school year. And so we are eager for those who select Bloomfield Virtual as their learning option for the fall semester or for the entire school year of 2021. We look forward to providing additional information at the parent orientation evening with registered families later this month. So we recognize that as you've listened to this presentation, additional questions may be coming up for you as you consider the decision around Bloomfield Virtual or Bloomfield in-person learning. And we'd like to spend a moment to direct you to where you might get some support in your conversation as you make your decision. So if you have questions specifically about enrollment and the process around that, I'm going to speak to that just a little bit in a moment. But if you've got questions beyond what you hear here this evening, please do contact our enrollment office. You've got contact information there for Sandra Dukey. If you're wondering about if this is the right instructional match for your learner, please do reach out to your child's current elementary or middle school principal. They know your child quite well, and in a lot of cases have been with him or her as a learner for a number of years already in this school setting. And so they may be able to offer some insights from that educational perspective that can help guide the decisions you're making at this time. If you have questions specifically for a student with an IEP or who receives some additional supports at school, we encourage you to, again, reach out to that building principal or directly to your child's caseload provider or the Bloomfield Hills School Special Education Department. Those would be great places to launch those questions. We did receive a number of questions specific to special education, and I can assure you that the response to each of those is very individualized based on the need of the learner and based on the types of the supports that are set up through the school day and with the IEP. So please do direct those questions directly with those folks. And if I choose option 1, in person with distance learning, who can I speak to about what that will look like before making a final decision for Bloomfield Virtual? You saw an image of a classroom this evening that Mr. Bidlack shared at the beginning. Of course, each of our elementary sites and our 3 middle school buildings with 4th and 5th graders are configured very differently. And so I would encourage you to reach out to your child's elementary or middle school principal if you have very building specific questions about certain grade level classrooms or some of the common spaces within the school and how those areas will be managed in an in-person setting. They would be able to provide you with the most in-depth information around the in-person versus Bloomfield Virtual comparison. And then if there are additional questions related to programming that we haven't covered here tonight, or that you'd like to hear more about, as a reminder, this presentation, as well as our FAQ, are posted on our district website, as well as the Bloomfield Virtual Handbook. And so those are all great resources to look into for closer detail. And I encourage you to contact me. My email is also there if I can be of assistance to you, either in navigating the system or some of the information that has been provided around Bloomfield Virtual. Again, if the parent, or if you do ultimately elect to register for Bloomfield Virtual, the parent orientation night for enrolled students will be announced shortly. And so the next steps for those that are saying, absolutely, I can't resist this learning opportunity for my child for 2021, this is how you're going to go about that. The annual registration process that all Bloomfield families complete, either within the parent portal or within the app, you have a screenshot of here. And so even for families who have already completed the annual registration, they'll be able to go back in and look on the left bar there specifically, you see enrollment options. And in the drop-down bar, there are 2 options. There is an in-person option as well as a Bloomfield Virtual option. And in-person option would mean, of course, as Mr. Bidlack has mentioned, we will be in a distant state for the start of the school year. And so that is the in-person option. And then Bloomfield Virtual is what you've heard about this evening. And so you select the appropriate option for your family from the drop-down and click to confirm that you've reviewed the section. When you hit submit, that will update that preference into your annual registration enrollment options. And provided that all the other steps have also been completed, then your annual registration for the 2021 school year would be complete. Within that dropdown, there is the option for the first semester or for the full school year as described above and in the directions there. So that is next steps for those who are ready to finalize that enrollment decision. So thank you so much for your time tonight. We are extremely excited about this learning opportunity. We recognize that this is a very individual decision And we commit to you that regardless of the choice you make and where that learning environment is for you within Bloomfield Hills Schools, we are absolutely committed to providing every learner with a safe and equitable, highly engaging experience that meets individual needs and that students feel connected, cared for, and continuously intellectually curious. We're very grateful for your time this evening. Again, we'll have this posted tomorrow, along with the additional information on the Back to School Blueprint on our BHS webpage. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to our design team and to all of our presenters this evening. Please do not hesitate to reach out to any of the mentioned individuals in terms of finalizing that decision for your child. Thank you so much.